Today's guest is a quiet general whose best work showed up on the world's biggest stages when the stadiums got loud. Andy Gomarsall, England scrum half, 2003 World Cup winning player, and a vital cog in England's 2007 World Cup campaign as England beat Australia and France to reach the Rugby World Cup final. Off the pitch, Andy brings the same clarity to business as an executive for N2S, building a circular economy, turning IT waste into measurable value. Decision rules, selection standards, and recovery design. If you lead teams or operate under pressure, this is your episode. Andy, welcome to the business end.
Thank you. Good to see you, boys.
And you?
Good to see you, Andy. Glad, looking great. So
just old, aren't we? We're just old. It's not good. I remember when we were running around all young and full of everything.
Speak for yourself, mate. You two are a lot older than me.
Yes,
fair enough. Sorry, Fitzy.
We start running around in our 50s, don't we, Fitzy?
Exactly.
Well done, you boys, for being able to do it.
We don't. I'm just making it up.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough.
But let's dive straight into it. Andy, first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've spoken before, and I know the viewers are in for some golden information here. First of all, let's dig into the DNA of Andy Gomarsall. What made you an elite performer, a consistent high performer as well?
It's a great question. I think luck plays an enormous part in anyone's success, and my luck was being born first and foremost.
That helps.
Yeah, it does. But having parents that are so supportive, and particularly my mum's no longer with us, but my dad, who is a hero mentor. I'm just lucky. I hear of people that didn't have the support from their parents. So you're lucky, right? Straight away, number one, blessed. And he was part of a boxing club. I was born in Durham. And raised in and around Newcastle, and there was this moment where he was part of a boxing club, and I think they must have had a few beers one night and said, we need to raise money for charity. Who do we invite? And so some bright spark said, let's invite Muhammad Ali. And he answered and he said yes. And it's called the Tour of the North, and it was in the late 70s. And so I sat on Ali's lap and got to spend time 2 weeks with him. But clearly I was a young lad, but the memory is Dad's a photographer, so he got loads of photos. So again, born lucky. I met the greatest sportsman ever, and I was not good at mini rugby. Jack, actually, my father, started, my first club was Doncaster under sixes, and you just don't know. No one knows if any child's any good at that sort of young age, but you just love everything, don't you? You love turning up on a Sunday. You love the smell of the changing room. You love the sweets afterwards, whatever it is. You love the community aspect of what rugby is. And then I played England under-18s at Doncaster Mini Rugby Club, right? I mean, that was a pretty momentous moment for me to go. Met Muhammad Ali, started at Donny, and then my coach was there, my first game for England under-18s. And I was like, wow, it's pretty amazing. So a lot of luck and a lot of inspiration. I think inspiration, and the main one was, I wasn't the best or the most skillful by any stretch of the imagination. And I think resilience was the biggest factor. So who am I? Resilience is one of my strengths. And I got that from reading and learning, from the days of Bali and his talent, but his personality as well. So just in the enjoyment of sport and the personality around it, what a lucky little git I was.
That's an incredible story. Was there anything in particular that you remember that sticks in your mind from that time meeting Muhammad Ali?
There isn't, unfortunately, Fitzy, because I was so young, and you can only get anecdotes from family and obviously my dad and what he was saying, but it was more than reading up about it and treasuring the photos that I had and signed memorabilia. It's kind of treasuring those, and then if you're as inquisitive as I was, it's kind of reading up about it and some of the things that he went to when some days we didn't feel like trading, right? It's you're at London Irish and it's teaming it down and no one's really up for it. You're absolutely knackered and you're battered as well, and you don't want to do it. It just, and you're not selected or whatever. And I'd think, what would Ali do? Well, he'd turn up and be the best trainer or the best, most positive person. So I was just lucky I took those elements, because frankly, what he went through is nothing compared to what what us all went through. And so it's quite a unique one for me that gave me the resilience to fight back and get stuck in and obviously be part of 03 and 07.
Yeah, and what they do, Muhammad Ali, I think one of his grandparents was Irish, so he could have boxed for Ireland.
There you go.
Yeah,
Amazing.
And I mean, it's a great story. I mean, would you say that he was like, him and your father, and obviously your mother as well, they were the biggest influences to give you that drive to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes it's just in you anyway. You don't know it, but it's kind of in you. And when I said to my dad, is being a father of three daughters, I said, how did you make me into wanting to win and wanting to be successful, and how did you create this beast, I call it? We're all beasts. How do you create the beast? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, oh, inspirational, Dad. Thanks so much. It's like, I'm looking for, how do I be the best father in that instance? And so I think it is within you anyway. Sometimes it's just the turning up. Frankly, I could have stopped playing. I could have stopped turning up, but you need a parent to be there, don't you, at a young age and help you turn up. And that's the number one. Why do people not ever succeed or play for England at football or rugby? Because they didn't turn up. That's the number one thing, right? So I was blessed in that regard. And so as a parent now, what do I spend my weekends doing, which I treasure enormously, is I'm on the side of pitches. I'm turning up. I'm driving them around the country, and I'm on the side of pitches. It gives me the greatest joy. That I'm sure that if my dad was on the podcast as well, he'd say, well, it was the greatest gift, the greatest joy, of traveling around and watching your children play sport, whether it's elite or not. It's one of the greatest gifts. So I think it's just in you, Liam. It's in you, and then you're lucky that as well. The network. I always lean back on my network. There are so many people that were in industry, business, that I would stumble across, and I would always ask their advice. And tell them that that I'm going to look at you as a kind of mentor. Can I ring you up every quarter or every half year or whatever it was, and just ask your advice? I'm in a sticky. What would you do? And I chose a few outside of rugby as well, or outside of sport. I thought that would give me a more balanced development and viewpoint. So I didn't get it all right. That is for sure. I had a very, very bumpy career, but I was definitely a sponge. I wanted to learn every single time and every single moment and be better for the experiences that I've had.
You're very well known, obviously. We've touched upon the 2003 and 2007 World Cups. Walk us through winning your first cap. How did that feel? And were you nervous taking to the pitch? And if so, how did you settle your nerves going into that?
I don't think it's any different from you boys, right? That moment where you're running out into a big game and it's something you wanted to achieve, whether it's playing club rugby or at the highest level international stage, you are absolutely petrified, especially when you're young. You don't know, you've never experienced before. It's stepping into the unknown. And I remember being with Jason Leonard, and I said I wanted his advice, and he said, there's 85,000, there'll be 85,000 people, cheering you on. Don't worry, but probably more worrying is there's going to be about 4.5 million watching on TV as well. So don't mess it up. And I was like,
no pressure.
Inspirational. Thanks, Jace. Inspirational. So I think you're just lucky to get through it, and then I think that the more nerves are the pre singing the national anthem, that's really nervous. And then I was more nervous probably about singing a song in front of my teammates on the bus as well, what song to choose and all that kind of stuff. So you are petrified, and it's a load of emotional energy. But as soon as that ball kicked off, a proud moment, people say, what's it like, and the feeling when you're stood there and you're looking for family in the crowd and people are there to cheer you on and singing that national anthem. is you feel like, oh my God, that's what it feels like. That's what I dreamt of. But as soon as that ball was kicked and you caught the ball and you had your first touch, you're into it. That was the easy bit, actually. It got more difficult because I played against Italy. It got more difficult the next week because we played New Zealand and Jonah was playing. So I realised that actually international rugby wasn't as easy as scoring 2 on debut and winning handsomely. The next week it came down with a crashing bump, losing against New Zealand. So the best ever feeling. And you kind of want to capture that in a bottle and keep it forever, but unfortunately you can't do it forever.
Yeah.
So what?
Do you use some of that kind of feeling now, though, Andy? Do you like dealing with pressure situations where you got butterflies in the stomach? Does that come into good practice?
It does. I think, I mean, my children would say to me, how do you get up on stage, Daddy, and talk in front of, at Twickenham, I'll be doing it in front of 1,000 people. I've been on stage, in business talking, how do you do it, Daddy? You must get nervous. And I'm like, I do, of course. Any speaker gets nervous before you go up, but it's that adrenaline rush and buzz. That's what you do. I personally do it for, because you miss that. We used to get it weekly, every single week, turning out for your club to play against a big, London rival or whatever it was. You got the buzz, didn't you? There was the energy, the excitement, and then the euphoria of winning, losing afterwards, celebrating with your mates, and rinse and repeat. I mean, that is a drug that is hard to come off, as we all know and have witnessed. So actually in business, doing the speaking, which I've done this week, I've done a lot of speaking this week, and you laugh at yourself sometimes. You think, oh my God, they think I'm a subject matter expert in X, and you're thinking, I just got the balls to get up there and talk about it, and be passionate about it, and enjoy speaking in front of people, and read the room, read the audience. So you do miss it. I think the overarching bit around that statement is find that buzz in business is hard. So I kind of get it in a mix of everywhere and everything, but it's definitely a longer burn in business than it compared to sport. I miss the week in, week out. And maybe I just haven't found the industry that gives me that drug. But when you get old, maybe it's wise not to have that every single week.
Yeah, I can remember we did an event, Andy, in I don't know if you remember it, in our Bothnops in London. Yeah. And then it doesn't help when your old teammates turn up in the crowd like Mark Regan.
Yeah, heckling.
So I think we had to get him on the stage to calm him down.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why not being in rugby was a good thing post career, because you just knew that they were going to take the mickey. I mean, I did an event this week, and it was one of my best mates is Simon Shaw. So Shawsy's been he's so bright, and he's a poet. I mean, literally a poet with his words. If you follow him on LinkedIn, and the audience, please follow Shawsy on LinkedIn. He's just got away with words. He's incredible human being, the gigantor, the giraffe that I call him. And so I'm 51 years old. He's 52, 53. And the first thing he does is take the piss out of me on LinkedIn, and I'm cutting the ribbon to open up the Recycling Expo. And he's speaking to my staff, and he's like, what was that person off Little Britain? And I'm thinking, oh God, here we go. Where's this going? And he's just straight at it. And I think, why did I get this guy involved to help me at this expo? When all he's going to do is absolutely rinse me, which he did. But it's you give us, as you know, with every 9, you give as good as you get. So, you take it on the chin, and it's just business sometimes doesn't have a smile on its face, but to have spent time with Shawsy this week with my business is pure delight. May all of that stuff continue.
Yeah, you can guarantee when the chips are down and you go in a changing room that someone's going to say something say something, and you just got to laugh about it, which is great.
You do. Yeah. But that's what gifts me an hours after dinner speaking. So I got it's just people say, do you not prepare? I'm like, I've got so many stories stashed away. You just get up and speak, and you just some of them, most of them are not true, but anyway. But it's you miss the banter, don't you? That's one of the key things.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're moving on now to selection and pressure. I mean, it wasn't always like as you said, your career was bumpy. Your definition of bumpy, I think you were at you kind of had a selection issue. I don't know if it was at Quins, and
no, it was at Wasps.
Wasps, yeah. And I think you close at one point to walking away from the game, and then you had like a reinvention? I mean, I don't know if I'm accurate in that, but I seem to recollect it.
Yeah.
And in fairness, it was a great example of bouncing back and resilience. But what was in your, what was in your mindset? How do you overcome like selection issues, adverse situations?
Yeah, I think you learn along the way. When you're young, you don't know, and unfortunately for us, it was. I say unfortunate because we were fortunate in a lot of ways, but the transition from amateur to professional is light years apart from today, now 2025, to when I left school in 93. So that 95, let's just say 95 to 2025. 95 was Nelson Mandela, Jonah Lomu, that World Cup, and the players weren't paid at that point. Yet, some of the countries were just nearly professional, great athletes like Jonah, clearly doing weights and everything, but we just didn't have the training time, and then suddenly you get paid to do it. So I think you feel blessed, but what you didn't have is the support the players have now. You've got different challenges in the game. But, so you had one coach effectively select you. And we, at England level, you had, for my era, was initially Jack Rowell, and you had two backs coaches. And so that was it, really. That was selection. Now you have a massive, you think of Andy Farrell and the Lions, the panel of selectors and selection specialists, it's a light years apart. So, and also, the game wasn't professional. So, you might have had a point, but rugby was built on values and respect of hierarchy. And, being a scrum half, unfortunately, you've got to be the voice. I remember playing my first game at Wasps, and I was told that Rob Andrew, if he didn't like your pass, you'd literally be booted out. I mean, it was, so if you,
No
the
pressure.
first pass to Rob Andrew and he caught it and he passed it on, and he looked back at you and said, okay, then you were going to stay at the club. If he said he didn't speak to you, then you were out. I mean, literally your bags were packed and you left. I mean, it was like that. So I was told that, and I'm like, frankly, I'm absolutely crapping myself. And then not only worse was, if the pack was going forward, I had Dean Ryan at number 8, and he would say, do not take this ball out. And then I've got Dean going, don't take this ball out, and Rob going, give me the ball. And I'm stuck in the middle going, oh my God, what the hell do I do? And no scrum half would give me any advice. So, especially Steve Bates at the time. So you're thrown into this going, oh my God. And then you're pleased to get the opportunity at a young age. And yes, selection and everything. I got capped quite early on. And you realise it is the big boys league, and you get things wrong. You're not prepared mentally. There was no, there was no coaching around that, no psychologists. But I did, when I was lucky to be flown out to, I was on an A-team tour to Australia, and it was a great, great tour socially, as well as the rugby that I was learning. And Matt Dawson was on that tour. He got concussed actually in the game. And it was in that era when, it wasn't a massive squad. So it was only 2 scrum halves, which were Dowie and Kieran Bracken. And I spoke to Kieran about it just recently. So that one of them had a bad back, or, both were suspects. And this was for the quarterfinal against Australia. And I go into this meeting, and we just lost the game, and expecting a bollocking. The then coach sort of said, we've got an announcement to make. Andy, you're leaving the squad. And I was like, Christ, what did I do? Is it because I drank too much or whatever? And he said, no, you're going to the 1995 World Cup. There's an injury. You might be playing against Australia in a week's time, not Australia A, Australia in the World Cup. And I'm 19 at that time. I'm 19, 20, and I'd never met Will Carling, Phil de Glanville, Jason. I'd never met these guys, right? So this was daunting. And when I got to the World Cup, I went from Brisbane to Sydney, Sydney to Perth, stayed the night with some RFU person in Perth, Perth to Harare, Harare to Joburg, Joburg to Cape Town. They were all different flights. So I got there massively jet lagged, but obviously clearly very excited. I got my Muhammad Ali book in hand, ready for inspiration. And when I got onto the bus, Rob Andrew was there. He gave me his shirt, which had Andrew on the back. That's obviously my Christian name. I thought, I've made it. And then I saw a guy in the middle of the bus, and it was Dean Richards. And he was like, finger, come to the back of the bus. And I'm thinking, does that mean I've got a drink or I've got to take the back of the bus? So I'm going to get beaten up, basically. And all they wanted to know was stories. They wanted, they were, it wasn't even professional, but they wanted some stories from the 18 tour. So they sat me down and said, right, you've got 30 minutes. Tell us what's happened. So that was a bit of pressure, right? And a bit of fun. But going back to your original question, how the hell did you come back from all those and ups and downs? I think you learn how to manage managers effectively, and at that time there was a lot of inexperience. They were either school teachers or they may have been plumbers. They didn't have any professional experience to be a coach. So I felt, at that point you were managing the manager, and most of them probably thought they were brilliant from a mentality point of view. They were brilliant at motivating you, and I couldn't. Some of them I just thought it couldn't be further from the truth, So I did have a rocky bit where I wanted my own fitness coach at Wasps, and that wasn't allowed. So, that was me gone, and you think crazy, right? Now is professional. Everyone's kind of got their own fitness coach. They're all leveraging the market to get a 1% gain. And yet I felt like I was a visionary, and I was paying for it. I wasn't asked the club to do it. I wanted to train. I wanted to do my own thing, and they wouldn't allow it because it wasn't part of the team. I tried to sign for Leicester, and I was going to sign for Leicester. And the only thing that stopped it was the fact that I wanted a fitness coach to come with me. And Dean Richards said, no, you've got to train with the squad as in the fitness and whatever. And of course I would have done, but I still wanted to do my own program because I'm different to Simon Shaw, for instance. They didn't allow that. So I went to Gloucester, Sant Andre. He was like, do you know what? I love what you're doing. I'll even pay for it. So he paid for my fitness coach for the first 3 years when I was, so I love Philippe Sant-Andre for being a visionary himself and giving me the opportunity. Now, the lads hated it, right? Because they had to do Sunday runs. They had to do all these. And they're like, where's Gomarsall? And I'm like smoking a Havana, by the side of the track going, sorry, guys, I've actually got a day off. And they're like, wow, anyway. So it was bumpy because I was pushing boundaries, and that's good if you're an entrepreneur and you're an innovator. That's good at pushing the boundaries. Rugby doesn't necessarily like that. So I learned the hard way, and I hold the record for the most amount of Premiership rugby clubs, 7. I think Chris Ashton's tried to take me on. Andy Gomarsall tried to take me on. They're all amateurs. I think they have 6 clubs. But I suppose the 2 weeks or the 4 weeks at Bath on loan probably shouldn't count. Look, I'm proud of my career. I'm proud of what I did, but I learned a lot along the way. There are some battles you pick and some that you don't, right? And you just get your head down and battle through it. And hopefully things change and it works out for you. But yeah, I made some horrors and some errors, but I've learned by those, right? And no one's successful without making mistakes.
Did you feel that you benefited in terms of growth in being in those different environments of trying those 7 clubs in the Premiership, because they're all going to be different culturally and different coaches and stuff? Did you feel that helped you on your journey?
Massively so, yeah. I mean, it's wonderful to have those great experiences, different coaches, but also when you run out on a rugby field, the difference in how the fans treat you. When I went to, Wasps was always fabulous, but it struggled because it couldn't find its home. Repton Avenue, Twyford Avenue, it was amazing. Then we went to Loftus Road, and then I left and the guys went to Adams Park. And then they went to the Ricoh Arena. It was then you go to Gloucester. Wow. Hairs on the back of your neck on the warm-up. So we purposely would run past around the halfway, and we'd run past the shed, and they would go bananas before the game. And it was the best. I felt as tall as Simon Shaw, in that moment. It was the best feeling ever. And you're like, wow. And that was another level. And it really got my love of the game back because of the pure and utter passion. So all those kind of experiences were brilliant. Different coaches. We went from Sant Andre. Paul Turner was there, who's, one of my heroes as a player, but also what a great coach and just a maverick in terms of how he coached. And then you've got Nigel Melville and Dean Ryan came in. The great experience of the different coaching and the different styles. The 1 year at Gloucester, we played a different style to everyone else. And we won the league the previous year. And then the next year, we won the league by 17 points. And we had to go to a final. And we lost to Wasps because we had to wait for them to win the Heineken. And then play the semi-final. They won, and then they beat us in the final. But I'm so proud of that generation, because no one for a season, no one could touch us. It was phenomenal. We changed. We sort of copied a methodology from the John Mitchell devised for New Zealand, and it worked so well. People just couldn't, and it gave us it gave some of the youngsters who were so fast the space to play expansive rugby, and it was an utter joy to play in and watch. And then I went to Quins, and they were so quiet. The fans were so quiet compared to Gloucester, and I was like, I was known as a cheerleader there, because I was like, I was running around going, "Come on, we've just done a good play and we've scored a try. Anyone?" And now they're, it's one of the most brilliant places to play in front of at the Stoop, and obviously Mark Evans did the big game, which is sold out twice every single year. I mean, amazing that he did that, and the innovation, and it's so successful, and the Quins crowd are amazing. So in answer to your question, Fitzy, it is the best experience, but I'll caveat that with, I'm so glad I played for all those clubs, but genuinely as a person, I wanted to be a one club person. And I would have stayed at Wasps for all my career. I wouldn't have had those experiences. I wouldn't have known. And like the Lawrence Delalios and other legends that played for Wasps, and they only had that. I never, because of my nature to push the boundaries and be innovative and go, that was my fault. I take it on the chin. I hold no blame whatsoever, but I would have loved that as well. Do you know what I mean? But I'm so grateful that didn't happen, and I got to experience all the things. I'd love to have played abroad. I know that you guys had some experience, and that would have been great. But I was in La Rochelle recently. I was like, wow, if I had my time again, I'd be playing for La Rochelle. Ronan, pick me.
I'm sure he'd have you in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So they say no plan survives contact with the enemy. As a playmaker and leader on the pitch, how do you approach? How do you lead when the game plan isn't working and needs adjusting on the fly? What's your thought process?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and there's a sort of, that's a military saying, and there's the one from Mike Tyson, is no plan survives being punched in the face. The first. So I think what I loved about the tactics at Gloucester and then with England, I mean, with Gloucester we had 3 game plans, and you do the analysis, and then on the fly you'd say, right, plan B. And you hear, I don't know whether you guys love F1, the Drive to Survive Netflix documentary just got me absolutely hooked. And you hear them talking, going through the race, they've got so many things to think about, and they're always talking about plan B, plan A, plan C, and they've got different codes. Same with America. I always loved, Jono loved and still does American football, and I loved the chess of American football. So that's what gave me the buzz about playing rugby was, that plan didn't, the first 10 minutes it's not working. Right, what's the next plan? And devising that during the week, but also then building upon that so that you had the ability to change a game plan. And in fact, we had 3 at Gloucester. Literally 3 game plans that we could go to. And then sometimes rugby's not that complex, right? You just got to, I'd get elbowed in the nose, smashed nose, and I just get angry. So I spent, 20 minutes just being angry, going around trying to kill people. The only reason I popped my clavicle was because I lost my rag. I think it was against London Irish. I wanted to kill somebody. And
was it Moo?
Yeah, it could have been. And popped my clavicle. I thought, you idiot, So I think, rugby has the different elements. I would sometimes, when you were getting reffed off the park, and one of the things with England and Clive was to manage the referee. That was we had 8 world-class performance standards, and one of the areas at the bottom was the referee, how to manage the referee. And obviously we had great leaders that were able to do that and manage. Sometimes, literally they're in the captain's pocket, but it can work the other way. So I would be the one telling the referee, you've given 7 penalties against us and we're doing, as we're told. I'd be in his ear trying to change the momentum of games, through. And it's very difficult now because we didn't have microphones and cameras, everywhere. The cameras on the referee now are right there, so you can't really say anything to influence. So it's all those kind of things that goes into a game of of rugby, and then you work out on a Sunday, why am I so tired? And it's because you're doing so much thinking. It's such a physical sport. And some games I come off thinking, oh, it wasn't that physical. And some, I struggled the last 80 minutes. You're absolutely on your knees. The game's totally different now. And I admire these guys now, the players. I really do admire them. And I think the game has moved forward. I think it's got a nice balance. I always used to watch football and, from your question, Fitzy, about the plan, players would just look up at the coaches and go, what do I do next? And I hated that. I was like, why can't you do it yourself? Why can't you manage your own game? And I think I was lucky in that we grew up in the amateur era, that you had to do that because you didn't have the backup. So your Rob Andrews and your Dean Ryans, they ran the show. The coach picked the team, or sometimes didn't. It was their show, and hence why they went into coaching, and they were amazing managers and coaches. They ran that team, and that was a great lesson for me, is that the coach can't play the game, you have to manage, and so I loved all of that stuff, and so I think we've had evolutions of international rugby in England where that hasn't been the case, but I think we're in a good place right now. I think there's some, look at Owen Farrell and George Ford, and a few of the players that run the show there now. They're incredible. They know exactly what they're doing. It's amazing.
100%.
Yeah. So moving on to actually, it's a very important thing you said about management of referees, and I want to talk about the Rugby World Cup, the big one, 2003 and 2007. But one great story I heard was about, I watched the game, and it's fair to say the front row for England were actually screwing Australia, but getting picked up by the referee. And one story I heard was about Jason Leonard coming on to calm the referee down, and that was probably a bit of a masterstroke, wasn't it? Would you be able to elaborate on that?
So Jono had lost the plot. We weren't getting any return, and then to say, what do you do next when the captain can't speak to the ref? Is you choose a scrum half, which is probably even worse than somebody who's lost the plot with the captain. So Dorse was trying to negotiate and speak to the referee, and not getting any change. So Jason's job was to come on, and so Jason, being so experienced, basically went up to the referee and basically said, I'll solve this issue now, and I'll do whatever I have to do to solve it. And I'm going to, we're not going to, get penalised in the scrum. And it worked because he's so experienced, and he was able to manoeuvre whatever, you guys know, the technicality of that survival, without a scrum collapsing or looking like whether you're boring in or whatever it is, he just got that scrum parity. We'd love to have kept pushing them back, but parity, so that we weren't being penalised, because that's what was getting Australia back into the game. So definite masterstroke.
Yeah. And what was the build up, and what do you think made that 2003 World Cup winning team so special?
It was so well prepared. I think the values and the teamship that was created by the players, but Clive was setting the tone. But I think all of that combination was way more professional than anyone else in the world. I think that was the key. I think the embarrassment of losing in 1999 to 5 drop goals by Yanni de Beer in this quarterfinal of South Africa, that's just never been repeated since. And so you've got to do something dramatically different. And the investment that Clive made, the work that behind the scenes, the 1%ers, no stone left unturned. It was phenomenal. So we were really well prepared. We laugh about some of the things that we had to do and that we did, but the effort, the effort and the scrutiny and everything was there. It was insane. And I think genuinely any of those players could have taken them to the field and created a similar level. Absolutely. And so he wanted specialist people, specialist positions, world-class athletes. And then I think the difference was also the failing each time. I remember 2000 losing a Grand Slam against Scotland. Those pain points really hurt you, and they drive you to the big pressure moments, not cave in or fall at those moments. So those guys that were at the top level, your Backies and your Jonos, They were all 35, 36, and you're playing against some of the Australian players would have been in their 20s and earlier. That experience massively helps at a big stage, and when you're under massive pressure, and having done that the previous year and won over in Australia, won against New Zealand, it just gave you the confidence and belief that this is going to be the year and it's going to happen. Now, nobody knows that, you're going to have to go to extra time and all of that stuff. So that's what made it even more special. Last minute drop goal, all of those things. That move and everything was planned. We practiced that. In fact, if we were winning a game, we'd call a move and just say, let's just practice it in the game. We've won the game, so why not? Let's do a drop goal routine, because you never know when we're going to need it. And I think the power of everything was, the best probably trainer. There'll be a few people that say, well, I was the best trainer, but frankly, the best trainer was Johnny Wilkinson, and that wasn't just kicking. He was a hell of an athlete. I don't think either you two would like to go down his channel. I mean, that famous tackle on Emile Ntamack absolutely put him on his backside, and Emile's a huge man and a great French icon of rugby. Not many fly-offs do that, right? They just put him on his backside. And so I knew at that point I had every confidence on the sideline, and actually the coverage pans to Clive and he's there, and I hit him on the shoulder, Clive, and he was kind of a bit like that. And it's like I just knew that Wilco would get it, because firing so many passes to him, whether it was Dorse, myself, or Kieran, he would kick the ball right foot, left foot, and just get it through the post. Now, talented, but his dedication and work ethic and work, you just knew there was only one player and person that would do that, and it was Wilco. So when it did go back to him, he actually, people forget, he kicked it off his wrong foot, to win the World Cup. He's left-footed. Yeah, he's left-footed.
Wow.
And he kicked it off his right foot. I mean, that is not only utter skill and mental resilience, it's also some serious kahunas. And the rest is history. And it was a great, little party.
I'm sure it was. Biggest understatement of the year.
Correct.
I want to pick up on something you said there, which I think is gold for anybody in life. And you mentioned there about some of the setbacks running up to 2003, the quarterfinal of the '99 World Cup, some of the Grand Slams where you'd gone all the way and were perhaps favourites to win, and then had beaten, I think, Wales, beat you in one, Scotland in the other.
Yeah, 99.
Yeah, and the old saying goes, fall down 6 times, get up 7. And the importance of taking a defeat or a setback and learning that lesson, learning what those incremental bits went wrong and putting them right. How important was that on the journey towards winning in 2003?
Well, massive. I mean, mine also extends to 2007, where we would have been the first team, because we lost to South Africa in the pool games. We could have been the first team to be knocked out of the pool stages, and obviously that happened in 2015. I was commentating for ITV during that, and it was horrific to see that the England team, and we're hosting, didn't even make the quarterfinals. I mean, horrific. It's just unfathomable. And at the time for us, we had 13 World Cup winners in that 2007 team and squad. That I just couldn't even think that was an option. And so I think those experiences, there's moments in a game where mental resilience fails you, and you lose the game, and it just happens in front of your eyes. It literally just happens in front of your eyes, and it's that the Aussies call it 1,000-yard stare. You don't actually know where you are and how it happened. It's just happened. And I think all of those feelings and results and moments, they help you in that moment to almost give you a jolt, give you a spark to get you out of it. Say, this isn't happening. This is not happening on my watch. I'm not going to. And I think 2007, I ran around those pitches, making sure that we weren't giving penalties away, making sure that we had cohesion, that the systems worked and the passes were accurate and we got momentum. I ran around that pitch literally every single second, making sure. And that was because of all the, I'd been beaten by Australia so many times, and George Gregan always had one over me, just a wonderful world-class athlete and scrum half. Even in England, they used to call it the Gregan ball, the behind the part, just he's an absolute legend and icon. And I had my chance against him in 2007, and I wasn't going to let it go by without making sure I got one over on him, which, thankfully we did in 2007 in Marseille. We beat Australia when the odds were against us. There was no way we were going to win that. So I think coming back to your point, Fitzy, is that all of those losses and all of that just makes you so steely. And, it doesn't always work like that, but there's determination, and then there's utter determination that I'm just not leaving this pitch until it's won. And that and I think I was guilty of getting bored during games. Not that I've got ADHD or anything like that, but I would have a plan and I would lose interest, and I got sloppy, and I wondered why they were taking me off. So that's ability to understand yourself more, but also channel down and use those losses and those hurts to motivate yourself in a game, I think is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Absolutely. So did you feel there, I mean, obviously you bridged the 2003 into the 2007 World Cup. Did you feel yourself or as a squad that a great weight of expectation going into the 2007 World Cup as the reigning champions? And if so, how what mechanisms did you guys put in place to deal with that?
I think there's a certain amount of pressure on the shirt. You've won the World Cup and you're reigning world champions. It's on the shirt. So you've got a huge responsibility to defend the title, right? That's number one. But then there's a form guide. We weren't a form team whatsoever. And it was a bit, at times, wacky races / just a pub team coming together. It was pretty all over the shop. And that wasn't necessarily the players' fault either, by the way. We chopped and changed coaches. There was a lack of consistency. And I think I'm a massive fan of Brian Ashton. When we won in 2003, it was his blueprints of attack and his DNA all over that England win. And then as head man, I love playing for Brian. But behind the scenes, it was there were parts that were utter shambolic, and so we had to deal with that, right? So. As I said, the experience of having Jono and Backy and people like that, Jason, as the 35-year-olds, that was my journey 4 years later. I was 33, 34. So come on, then step up to the plate. So I think we did, Lawrence, myself, Catty, people like, Mike Cat. We definitely stepped up and took control. And I have no... I have no regrets over that. We needed to do it, and I think it definitely did help because we got to a World Cup final, and the parallels in business I use are, the best prepared team in the world, and probably for England we were the worst prepared team 4 years later, and yet we both got to a World Cup final. So you're within moments of winning, back-to-back World Cups. You are, and you can say the South Africans you can turn off now because. I'll basically say we were a foot in touch away from winning another World Cup, and they'll say, well, it was definitely a foot in touch and you had no chance of winning. And that's utterly fair. But those are, in business terms, those are the two differences. We were the best prepared team. We only just won it in extra time. And we were the worst England prepared team, and we were a foot away from winning a World Cup. And you don't get those moments in life very often. So be thankful that you did, but in the moment, make sure you bloody win, right? And so I'm really lucky that, the pain of losing that World Cup final was lessened by the fact that I knew what it felt to experience winning it. And, you're then remembered to, no one says you lost a World Cup final, you're a World Cup winner, and that's really important to me. But I always use the parallel of how close it was and how much effort went into both, but how different they were. They were totally and utterly different. But I was so glad and proud of the continuity of the 13 World Cup winners that we did. I feel we backed up and did our country proud by getting to a World Cup final, even though it seemed impossible. We did. And actually, when the expectation's so high versus when the expectation is so low, the enjoyment factor is a very different measure. It really is. And so you ask Phil Vickery, which was the most fun in the World Cup, and he'll say 2007. It's on record that he said that. And I felt the same way, yet a lot of it, we talk about 2003 and the joy and everything, but actually we had such a great team and a love of that team in 2007. And it was very different, but we enjoyed it, and we're proud of our performance. But two very different, very different outcomes, but two very different experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it was the first game you played South Africa, wasn't it, in that World Cup?
Yeah,
And it was
yeah.
like, what, 30, 40 pointer? Was it
I've deleted it from my memory, Liam, to be honest.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a remarkable story. And then you play Australia in the World Cup quarterfinals, and you hit a vein of form. And actually, in fairness, I thought England were going to win the World Cup. And it was a remarkable story. But I mean, in the pool games, like England were basically written off. And I mean, how do you cope with that? How do you shut out the noise and just get on with the job when you've got people saying, "Oh, this is a write-off. We lost to South Africa by 40. We're not going anywhere."
Yeah, I think that's where your teammates come in, and the coaches, and also the people. We can always talk about the insular element around the support and everything. How do you deal with it? I was lucky I had external forces of support, and so I will always just say to the young players growing up is have external people that can give you a more measured and a balanced view, rather than an ex-sportsman or an ex-player that's been there and done it. I think that gave me a wider, bigger context as well, and sort of drags you back. Rugby is a simple game. It's pretty straightforward in terms of it's run hard, physical, and it's the emotion. And sometimes you forget on why, especially in the professionally, you forget why you're doing it. Remember yourself when you were 6 years old running around a pitch and what it meant to your parents, or what it means to your friends that you're representing your country and playing internationally. You tend to forget that. You've focused so much on the detail, and I've got to play against whoever it is, Just van der Westhuizen or whoever. You forget actually why you're bloody doing it and why you love it. And I took time to reflect on all of those things and work out why. And then latterly you find your purpose is different when you have a family. I'm not now playing for myself and my dad and my mum and my wife. I'm playing for my children. I do not want to embarrass my children, and that becomes way more emotional in a lot of contexts, because your life changes once you've had children. And so 2003 I didn't have children. In 2007 I did, so that made it a very different tournament for me personally. And so you just take all of these things out, and how do you cope? Well, you find a way ultimately, but you're only as good as your network and support that you've built. And I built a very strong foundation, I feel, that helped me, an average person that I feel like I sort of was, to do something pretty extraordinary.
So after beating a very good Australian and France in the quarters and semis, take us into the group. What was the mindset like leading into the final after facing South Africa in the pool play and not having such a great result? How did that all play out?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously could use the analysis of that to play South Africa again and go, we're never playing like that again, are we? So the tactic would have been very, very different. The team was slightly different as well. And I think there's an element of the underdog as well. I mean, clearly we were the underdog, and that's a threat as well. And I think South Africa were very quick to dispel any, noise around, especially what the press do is they build up stories. I think they were very quick to kind of stop any noise around, well, we thrashed them last time, we'll thrash them in the final, sort of thing. Because you can use those things as massive motivators. So we tried the whole motivation, we've got nothing to lose, which is a lovely thing going into a World Cup final. Whereas, playing Australia in their host town and your favourites, that's a different kind of a mindset and pressure. So, I love playing the underdog as well. I think, you boys did as well, or do. It's a great feeling to get a scalp over somebody. So there was that opportunity. I think obviously testing ourselves against a team that were formidable, but trying to do better than the last time, which was embarrassing. So you had an element of pressure. Do not embarrass the nation again, because you did last time. So there's a number of things. Then we went in with a game plan that I think could take on South Africa, because no one had beaten them. But I think what one thing is that we'd expelled so much energy, and we had a few fitness worries, and we ran ourselves dry and drunk, as it were. In the end, Jason Robinson had pulled his hamstring in the warm-up games, and then he made it back. But you see Jason in that final, he's absolutely battered. When we had a scrum half on the wing by the end of the game, we would just run. We ran out of legs and steam, and that's credit to South Africa. But we gave them a bit of a fright and a bloody good go. And I truly believe that try was a try, and had that been the case, you never know. I'm not going to say we would have won, but you never know. But I don't live by life like that at all. It's just that's a fact. So I think we prepared well, and we gave it a bloody good go.
Hell of a comeback story.
Final.
Yeah. No, I love it.
Yeah, and moving over on to business, it's fair to say you're a great example of someone that's made the crossover from sport into business. You're the executive director of N2S. How did you find that transition from a player into the boardroom, into business?
Not easy at all. I think it's that first moment. I have to say, at the end of my career, I was playing at Leeds Carnegie, and I loved that year. But I was very tired. I was an old man, and I didn't want, if it made sense, I didn't want to wear a polo shirt or a tracksuit anymore. I was like, come on, you're a father now, grow up, wear a suit. It's embarrassing. And that's just weird because most people don't think like that. But I was ready for it. I prepared really hard, but no one actually prepares you. And there's a lot of, transitional people I meet from the military, and you do feel like you've fallen off a cliff. Like, what now? Or like, where's my regime? Like, what? I'm supposed to be in the gym now at 9 o'clock and with the lads, and off I go. Now I'm twiddling my thumbs and I'm sat in front of a screen going, what the hell am I doing? And it's really hard in that regard, especially if you're motivated like myself. It's really weird and hard. So I gave myself time to do it. Not that I was already in business. I was working at Quinn's. I had a business at Quinn's. And, the guys were playing cards on the bus, and I love playing cards on the bus. But in the end, I was working, when I was going to game, not on the Saturday traveling to a game, but, the night before or the day before, I'd be there working on the bus going up. So I'd loads on, I had plenty to do, but it's still hard. And I feel that I did well, and it was a good transition, and it was relatively straightforward, but it wasn't easy at all. So, I'm proud to represent the O3 champions at the moment, and we've got a funded, so it's all done, funded next month for 20 athletes, rugby players that have retired, and we're doing a transition course, and there's a 2-day stayover launch where we're setting the tone. Everyone has a mentor, and it's for a year, and so it's all funded. I'm really proud to be driving that with the O3 champs. The RPA do an amazing, Rugby Players Association do an amazing job, and all we're trying to do is collaborate and with the power of the O3 champs fundraise to be able to support and complement what they're doing. So we're in transition to collaborate on that. And I know it's not easy, and I know that people change and they go into whatever industry and it doesn't work out for them, and then they go into teaching and it doesn't work. It's really hard to play your sport for so long and be new to the table at 35 or even 40 years old, and you've got to start from the bottom in business. Is really, really hard because you didn't have that run rate of learning on the job to then being at 30 years old in a potential CEO role, because you're now the janitor at the bottom. You've got to work your way up through the business life. So it's not easy, but I was so grateful and thankful when my father sort of said, I need your help. Can you come in? And I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What's it? And so I think number one for me was, if you go and get a job in the corporate land, trust is a massive thing that just doesn't come readily and easily. You can try and trust people, but it's not like the rugby days. No one ever, there'd be the odd occurrence, but very rare. No one would let you down. And in business, unfortunately, that's a common occurrence, that people get let down. So working with my old man, and I said, are you sure, you want me to come in and be a director and a shareholder? I was like, are you sure? And of course he was, because he's so proud of my career and proud of who I am. And that's equally back. But he gave me this opportunity, and he said it was going to be the best lesson ever. You know, when guys were going off and working for big corporates, I'm in a tiny business. What do you do for a living? And I couldn't really articulate what it was. But I did know, but I didn't realize how big an opportunity it was. He said the best lesson you're going to learn is understanding P&L, you know, firing people, hiring people, cleaning out the warehouse, you know, the whole pitch of the gamut of understanding small business and understanding cash flow and all of that stuff. When you're paying people and the pressure, you talk about pressure playing at Twickenham, the pressure of, you know, there's not enough cash to pay the payroll is a frightening prospect, and a pressured element to being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. And he was right. It's the best thing I ever did, even when, you know, I was looking at other people's, you know, seemingly flying off and being so successful in their business or working for businesses. I was sort of sat there just really grinding it out, and I'm glad I did, and I'm so lucky that I'm in this position. But I still feel like I'm still at the start of the journey. I don't think well, I know I've done those elements where I felt that it's been successful with my dad. You know, getting him partially semi-retired, things like that are really important to me. That was one of my big goals, is to make sure that he was looked after. He looked after me during my career. Now I can look after him, hopefully, in his post-retirement. But he created this innovation, which I'm now so lucky to take forward. So again, like playing in a rugby team or a sport, you've got this legacy. You've got to leave the shirt in a better place. People that work in corporates that have no culture, that'd kill me. I'm so lucky that I've got that ability to. I've got such a huge responsibility to create the legacy and create something. So, and you can see that as pressure, but I love it as what an opportunity. How lucky am I to have that opportunity? So, another bumpy ride, right? I mean, I had it in my rugby career. Why wouldn't I have it in business? But it's been a great experience, and you know, I'm not there yet by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm still learning, and I still want to do more in rugby. I'm patron of the School of Hard Knocks charity, which I helped set up. I was a trustee. And School of Hard Knocks says what it does on the tin. It was a TV show previously, helping children get back into full-time education by teaching them rugby. I mean, one of the greatest gifts to be able to be associated with. So Ken Cohen's our CEO and founder, and it just gives me so much inspiration and pride being involved in a charity like that. And I knew once we won the World Cup, okay, what good are you going to do in the community now? What good are you going to do? Because you've got a name now. All of a sudden, that's going to be always associated with something successful that people may remember or not. And I always joke, by the way, when I speak, I say, has anyone heard of me? You know, blah blah blah, and they all look at me like no. And I say, okay, I'm going to tell you, I was a pretty big deal. And when I kicked that winning drop goal in the World Cup final, they have no idea who they're like. I just make it up. But yeah, so I'm very lucky to have these businesses now, and yeah, I've still got a lot to achieve and a lot to do. But I'm very grateful.
You've got the mindset of an elite performer never leaves you, Andy, because you're always looking to improve, always see you can get better, and that never stops, and that probably will never stop.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if I'm anything like my father, he's still going. You know, he loves it. He loves the buzz of it, and it keeps you alive. And you know, if you've got something that's so purposeful, you know, you just got to keep going, right? I love that. So I think you're right, Liam.
Yeah.
Keeping busy and making a difference. It sounds like you've got a lot on your plate, and that sounds very exciting. What you're doing with the O3 champs and School of Hard Knocks, and wishing you every continued success. Want to go back to the transition there and dial in. What did you feel was the hardest part of the position? You sort of talked about it in broad terms. Was there anything particularly that you struggled with, and if so, you know, how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can do, and I think one of the hardest things, and the RPA definitely do this to help the players. But the ex-military people that I've met didn't necessarily understand their skill sets and where they were positioned in at work, because they're very different things, right? Yeah, being an elite performer in sport and having a specific job isn't necessarily built into a business, right? You have to find the parallels. And so I didn't actually realistically know. And I think some of my board members still don't know what I do. But anyway, that's another story. It's finding, the hardest thing was, okay, so what do I do? And understanding that. So the transferable skills. And I took one of those Clifton strengths tests it's a Gallup. You can look it up. And that was really interesting. It's got 34 strengths on there, and it prioritizes. You do a series of interviews and you do a Q&A on the spreadsheet, and it maps out, effectively what your strengths are. So I've not said at one point weaknesses, right? It's all 34 core strengths, which I love, right? So it's a bit like how Eddie Jones, and I think Arsenal have copied it now. You're on the bench, you're disappointed, but he calls them finishers. I love that. It's so positive. You're coming on to finish the game, whether we're behind or drawing or ahead or whatever. You're finishing it, and you're really important. I love that. So these 34 strengths, that you're listed in terms of your top 10, your top 5. So you find out the beast that you are. And so you can portray that. And I think that's one of the hardest things, that people come out and they've served and they've led 400 people or 1,000 people, and they stick them in an office, and you go, why are you doing that? The CEO can't even do that. Get this person into being a COO or not, you know what I mean? And I think that becomes missing. And I know that it's recruiters' kind of jobs to do that. But as a sports person, you never brag about why you're in the team or why you're good, because you're just going to get shot down. But in business, everyone brags about, I'm the best at this, and this is why I'm the best in the way to do. Sports people don't do that, because you're just going to get absolutely rinsed. So there's that whole thing of talking yourself up and they don't like doing it. They won't want to do it. They lead and they get on with it and they deliver, and and that is such a big skill. And I think I found that hard. I was a bit lost. Where do I fit in this? What am I doing? And I think that's a really hard thing. So go out, find out what your strengths are and find the right role to fit with it, because you'll thrive. You'll become more empowered, you'll thrive. And I think a lot of people are still lost because they still don't know what their ultimate force is and their strength.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Andy, because some of the best people just get on with it, keep their head down, grind. They show up when the chips are down, but they don't often get promoted because they're not shouting from the rooftops.
Correct.
And that to me is like leadership, spotting those people. You've got to be able to spot those people. So important. I mean, I see it in law firms a lot, where some of the best lawyers, they never get promoted because they don't want to show off.
Exactly.
So I mean, you talked about the transition. What rugby habit would you say has served you the best in that transition in your business career so far?
One of the big ones was turning up on time. We had Clive put in Vince, so he called it Lombardi time. So no one was ever late because you were 10 minutes early. And I used to hate it, being there 10 minutes early. And I hate being late, but I'm always late because I've always got too much on my plate. So it's not me being rude. It's just, it's the chaos behind and taking on too much. They say learn the word no and use it more. I can't do that. All right, I'm terrible. My wife will tell you I just say yes to everything. So I'd love it to have been that habit. But I think the whole rugby habit and sport is if you say you're going to do something, you go and bloody do it. I mean, you don't let anyone down. I think that's a great trait in business. I think you'll always, even and treat people how you wish to be treated. That was a great, habit in, that the importance of, Dave Tennyson was our kit man, but we were going to, he wanted to be the best kit man ever. And we loved him and helped him and supported him. And he was part of the team. And I love that, is the importance of culture and making people feel like $1 million, and that the caterer feels like they won the World Cup. You know what I mean? That is a great rugby tradition and habit. I think it's so important. And maybe in business, we don't do that often enough. A couple of my staff had just done a brilliant expo, and, I'm all about, you made that such a breeze. We looked the best. Everyone was talking about the company, and it's because you worked so hard to set the standard and deliver on the day. And then I come in and do my little speeches, and all of that stuff. It's really the foundation that they created is the most important, and you feel proud of it. I think those kind of rugby habits of discipline and saying what you were going to do, turning up on time. I might be a little bit late, so anyone that knows me is that I'm late for. I mean it disrespectfully. I've just taken on too much. All of those kind of things are really, really important. And it's the old school. I think the old school is the best. And if you're ever in business and you are able to work with people who you want to work with, you have a choice. That's another great gift. There's a couple of rules in rugby, wasn't there, that no dickheads allowed kind of thing. And some people have to work with those kind of types of individuals. So yeah, creating a business and having a team that has that sort of culture from sport is another great gift.
Absolutely. I think businesses can get 5-10% of what you get on a rugby team. They're on to a winner. So
yeah, I think as well, recruitment, and obviously, you guys are more knowledgeable in this area, but I think business really misses out on the ex-sportsman or the current sports. I really do think that they miss out because the traits are so big and we don't make enough of it. I think there's a real missing cog there that needs to be addressed, and some people do it really, really well, but it's not uniform enough for me. I really think that.
Yeah, don't find me up on that one, Andy. I've got a recruitment business, and I often see people just hire on skill sets and they forget about personality.
Yeah, exactly.
It drives me insane. You'll get a really good person who's really driven, but because they lack one bit of experience, they don't get a job, and you're like,
it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So looking conversely at to Liam's question there, were there any habits that had served you well as an athlete that you had to unlearn or to be effective in N2S or any of the other roles?
Well, I mean, the first lesson I learned, which was pretty cruel, was, you're successful and your head gets too big and you cut corners, and that was the biggest lesson I learned. I used to practice my passing. And I got lazy. I was like, I don't need to do that anymore. And, if I was doing 100 a day or 300 a day, I'd do 50. And it cost me. It really killed me. And that was a big kick in the face, really, to myself. So, that preparation and hard work behind the scenes, and everyone goes, oh, it looks so effortless. Well, that's because I know my stuff and I've really had to learn it and, all of that stuff. So I think those bits are the ultimate foundations, and it seems so simple, but the reason people aren't successful is because they're unwilling to do that hard stuff that is boring and that nobody wants to watch or nobody wants to do because it's horrible and it's hard. And it's the same with getting up and doing fitness in the morning. Not everyone does it, but it's the ones driven that get up an hour earlier and do it and feel so much better. And they're all like, why do you feel so much better? Because they're getting out of bed and they're making the effort, and do you know what I mean? It's all that sort of stuff. So I've fluctuated with all of those things, but I know the answer, right? You know the answer, and I coin it. I give myself an uppercut, and it's that looking in the mirror. There's a lady I follow, a bit of Chris Evans, and there's a couple of other podcasts that I follow, and there's a lady, and she calls it looking in the mirror and giving yourself a high five. As a parent. You're trying to say to your children, just be nice to yourself, right? There's the flip side of that, giving yourself an uppercut, but it's also be nice to yourself as well, right? So it's that sort of balance for me. And I, at times, needed to give myself an uppercut. I really did. And I think it's quite a humbling, and it's humility, isn't it? That no one is perfect. And sometimes you need to give yourself a talking to. But then other times you need to not be so bloody hard on yourself and harsh on yourself, and that's where depression happens, and the suicide rates are scary, things like that. People are just too hard on themselves, and I think the humour side. When I got to know the Commandos, the Royal Marines, one of their characteristics and values was commando humour. And I really appreciate that, and I think that comes from sport as well, which, straight away we get on a call and we're laughing and we're, there's an element of having, taken the Mickey. I think that kind of humour in adversity and everything else and is just so important, and it keeps you going. We're going to certainly need it, obviously, with the news with Lewis Moody recently. It's really hit the players, not just the 31 or 30, the rest of the players that played with Lewis and was captained by, it's really hit us hard, and we're here for him and we'll do anything we can. But that commando humour, I think, we'll still have a laugh and we'll still, work so hard to support him. And that's what you need in adversity sometimes, isn't it? You just need that to break the ice and move forward. So yeah, a lot of the things in sport, Fitzy, have helped me. They just have, and you got to choose the right moment and the right time. But yeah, a lot of things, a lot of the values and the traditions have just really helped.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, very sad news about Lewis Moody. Very sad. And I saw a wonderful interview from Will Greenwood on Sky News about it, and putting things into perspective. But it's just sad news.
Yeah,
it is. I spoke to a dear friend who's done incredible amounts yesterday without giving names away, and he's positive, and he's got that attitude, Mudos. He's an incredibly kind, wonderful human being, and he's courageous, and he's got that attitude. He's going to fight it, and he's positive, and we're all absolutely behind him, and we'll do whatever he needs, and we're already in discussion to support. So, but that just shows the mark of the man, right? That he's when you think his life's caved in, he's still positive. Incredible human being.
Yeah. The interview, I mean, the bravery he showed in that interview was just, just absolutely remarkable.
And Annie as well, his wife, and his boys are fabulous. Yeah, what a wonderful family. Is going to go through a tough time.
Yeah, we'll watch that space, Andy, with the support that the 2003 team do, and the 2007 as well. So, I mean, moving on, obviously, it's quite hard to move on to the quick fire questions, having discussed Lewis Moody. But in terms of just far off with your answer, 2003, 2007, harder mentality?
2003.
2003, okay. Box kick or snipe?
Different moments, but I definitely go with the snipe.
Could you answer that as a prop, Fitzy? Box kick or snipe?
Definitely a box kick.
Yeah. We used to hate that. Come on, lads, let's run it. We're like, oh no, please don't.
Just kick it.
Just kick it in the touch. Just have a line out. Best scrum half you faced?
Oh, well, it would have been a Just for sure. Just van der Westhuizen, and very almost unparalleled George Gregan for obvious reasons, but Just definitely. He had the snake eyes. He looked at you, and I think in the first game I played against him, he had a bit of a pickup from the base occasionally of the scrum, and I tapped his hand and it fell on the floor and didn't go to the fly half, and he just looked at me with the snake eyes like that, death stare, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I will never do that again. It was like, I'm so sorry, Mr. van der Westhuizen. I don't know what I was thinking. I'll never do that again. It's the utter adoration I had for him. But then I played Barbarians with him and got to get to know the person and the player. And he was, absolute icon and legend of the game.
What's the best pre-match speech you've ever heard?
Well, we do often in speeches about Mark Regan's ones, but they're not clean enough.
For this business podcast.
Exactly. What a great man to have in your circle. John O's is always the best. I mean, and Lawrence as well, obviously, but very different. And Clive would have all the technical stuff come in and the plans and everything. And Jono would get us in the huddle and everyone would leave and he'd just go, sod all that, let's just beat the hell out of them. That was like, yes, let's go.
Simple but effective.
Keep it simple.
How do we sell that to a boardroom when we're talking about...
No, but sometimes you just got to roll up your sleeves and just get on with it. Action.
Yeah.
FDI.
One trait you always hire for?
Just attitude, number one. I mean, it just, honestly, the amount of people I see, attitude's number one. It's totally it. If you haven't got that, you're not even coming through the door.
Coach you would steal a habit from?
Coach I'd steal a habit from. I mean, the habits came from 2003 and what Clive did, and there's so many amazing ones and good ones to take. They're all brilliant. We had this playbook and teamship rule book that was created by the senior leadership, and what a book to have, right? There's full of them in there.
And he gave you all laptops, didn't he? I think some of the front row guys kind of struggled with the laptops.
Yeah, but once the internet came along and they found out what they could download, they were soon keen to pick up a laptop, I can assure you.
Okay, and I probably know the answer to this, but what's next for Andy Gomarsall?
What's next? Oh my gosh. I think more in business, definitely, and being further around the world. So I'm proud of the Made in Britain element, but I also want to be able to experience on a global level. But also then latterly to contradict that, a friend of mine's actually out in India at the moment advising UK government. And so I think there's a lot that a sports person that's been in business could also help with government in policy. And I'm a big advocate, as you know, of sustainability and environmentals. And so there's an element I really want to support and help. Social impact as well with digital poverty, which we're just about to launch. I think the whole of the tech companies could solve digital poverty in the UK. There were 74,000 kids that did GCSEs this year that didn't have a laptop at home, and I just think that's going to stifle our economy moving forward, and it's absolutely insane. And I think the tech industry can solve that. So that's on my next agenda. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm being interviewed in sport as well for a non-exec director role. So there's a lot I want to give back to more in sport. So yeah, there's a lot to do.
We might see you in number 10 then. Is that what you're saying, Andy?
Definitely not a politician. I'm good at washing up. So maybe as as a chef's hand.
But thanks, Andy. It's been brilliant having you on the show. So many insights there that we've learned, and like throughout your whole rugby journey, you showed resilience, elite performance. You're a great communicator, and we thank you for your time today, Andy.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure speaking to you both and seeing you again.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.